Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be going over lesson 5.5, which is solving quadratics by factoring. And before we actually get started with the notes, I am going to go over something that I didn't put in there. And if you want, the next page, so the page that looks like this, we're actually going to be skipping those notes. So if you want to kind of scribble out the questions here, I can just do that. If we want to scribble those out and just write in what I'm putting, you can do that. Or if you have a separate sheet of paper, however you want to do it. So the last lesson, we looked at the graphs and the tables on the calculator. And we looked at how where those crossed the x-axis by looking at the actual graph. Well, you may not have access to that, or your x-intercepts may not be at nice whole numbers, so it may be harder to find them. There's other ways that we find those x-intercepts. And so the first other method we're going to talk about is factoring. And so factors of a quadratic look something like this. X plus 7, 2x minus 1. Those might be factors. So if I have a quadratic and I can do what's called factoring, I can break it down to make it into simple chunks. And these chunks we call factors. You may have learned a little bit about factoring in Algebra 1. I'm not sure, it just depends on how far your class got. So some of this might be a review for you. But the factors are important to helping us find the x-intercepts. And what we do is when we have factors, we take each factor and set it equal to 0. So just like that, and then we solve. So for example, this left one, I want to solve for x. So I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. The 7's cancel, leaving me with x equals -7. The other one, if we add 1 to both sides, the 1's cancel, 2x equals 1, and then we divide by 2 to get x equals 1/2. This tells me that I have x-intercepts at -7 and 1/2. So -7 and 1/2. So let's do another example. Let's say your factors are 4x minus 5 and x plus 3. Try this one. So pause your video and see if you can try it out. All right. So 4x minus 5 equals 0. And x plus 3 equals 0. So the first thing we do is add 5 to both sides. So those cancel. 4x equals 5. And dividing by 4 gives us x equals 5/4. The other one, we subtract 3 from both sides, giving us x equals -3. So the x-intercepts are 5/4 and -3. I prefer that you leave these as fractions, so don't actually divide 5 divided by 4 and get a decimal. Just leave it as a fraction. All right, so now let's go back to the actual first page of this lesson, and I'm going to show you how to actually get the factors. So number 1, x squared minus 10x plus 21. Now this method that I'm about to show you is only good if there's not a number in front of the x squared. If there was, then there's a longer, complicated process that I'm not actually going to teach you. You'll just be able to use the quadratic formula once we learn that. Okay, so don't worry about factoring if there's a number in front of the x squared. So let's make an x, a big X. On top of the x, we're going to put our c. On the bottom, we're going to put negative, we're going to put our b value. So my c is 21, my b is -10. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to be 21, but add to be -10. And these can be a little tricky, so sometimes you really just have to play around with your numbers. So one thing I like to do to help out is I like to list out all of the ways that I can multiply 21. 1 and 21. 3 and 7. That will give me positive 21 when I multiply. But also -1 and -21. Those multiply to be positive 21, because when you multiply two negatives, it makes a positive. -3 and -7 also multiply to be positive 21. Now from here, let's look at all of those and see which ones I could add to get -10. So if I add those first two, that's 22. Not that one. If I add 3 and 7, I get 10, not -10. Okay, if I add the next ones, that's -22. Nope. And then if I add those last ones, I get -10. So those are my magic numbers, -3 and -7. So now we're going to make those, we're going to turn those into our factors. We're going to put x minus 3 and x minus 7. So those are our factors. And if you remember, we take each factor and we set it equal to 0. So the first one, I add 3 to both sides to get x equals 3. And the other one, I add 7 to both sides to get x equals 7. So my x-intercepts, these are also, remember, they're also called zeros, solutions, or roots. They are 3 and 7. All right, number 2. Let's make our x. 15 goes on top, 8 goes on bottom. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to be 15, add to be 8. So we always want two numbers that multiply to be the C value, add to be the B value. If you can just look at it and you know without having to write it out, that's okay. But I'm going to write out all the ways that we could multiply to be positive 15. 1 and 15. 3 and 5. Or we could both be negative. Negative 1 and negative 15. Negative 3 and negative 5. Okay, now let's see what happens when we add them. 1 and 15 makes 16.
Make sure you check your email. Ms. Ballinger just sent an email about if you're going to get your second COVID vaccination today, there's some forms you have to fill out and take with you. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Next, 3 plus 5 is 8. That's our number, so we can stop. 3 and 5. 3 times 5 gives us 15. 3 plus 5 gives us 8. So let's turn those into factors. X plus 3, x plus 5. Those are the factors. We have to set each factor equal to 0. X plus 3 equals 0. X plus 5 equals 0. Then we subtract 3 from both sides to get x equals negative 3. And subtract 5 from both sides to get x equals negative 5. So I'm going to call them something different this time. My roots, remember that's the same word as x-intercepts, zeros, and solutions. My roots are negative 3 and negative 5. All right, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to be negative 18 and add to be 3. This one's a little different because what we're multiplying by is a negative number. And to multiply to get a negative number, you have to multiply one positive and one negative. So a positive times a negative equals a negative. So I'm just going to list out all of the ways that I can get 18. 1 and 18. 2 and 9. 3 and 6. And now we want to know how I can add to get positive 3. So remember, when we multiply, one of those has to be negative. So let's just go ahead and make the first ones negative. Negative 1 plus 18. What is that? Type it in your calculator. Negative 1 plus 18. That's 17, not 3. Negative 2 plus 9. Type that in. Negative 2 plus 9 is 7, not 3. Next one. Negative 3 plus 6. That one is a positive 3. So we got it pretty quick. Negative 3 times 6 is negative 18. Negative 3 plus 6 is positive 3. So our factors are x minus 3 and x plus 6. And then I take each factor and set it equal to 0. So add 3 to both sides. We get x equals 3. And subtract 6 from both sides. X equals negative 6. So my x-intercepts are 3 and negative 6. You may be noticing a pattern. You may be realizing that our x-intercepts are always opposite of those two special numbers that we get. And that is correct. However, I don't want you just to get those numbers and immediately go to the opposites. I want you to practice actually factoring and showing how you set it equal to 0. It's a little more work, I know, but I still want you to do it. All right, there's 3 more questions. I would love for you to pause your video and actually try these out. See if you can figure out what the x-intercepts are. And if you feel confident about it, you can just scroll through and check your answers. And if not, you can continue watching. All right, number 4. I'm going to move a little bit faster. You can always change the playback speed to slow it down. We're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to be negative 20, but when I add them, I get negative 1. So numbers that multiply to be 20, 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. Now because it's a negative 20, one of those numbers has to be negative. It could either be the 1 or the 20, the 2 or the 10, the 4 or the 5. So see if you can figure out what numbers multiply to be negative 20, but when I add them, I get negative 1. And those numbers are 4 and negative 5. So I'm going to factor this as x plus 4 and x minus 5. We take each factor. X plus 4 equals 0. X minus 5 equals 0. Subtracting 4 gives me x equals negative 4. Adding 5, x equals 5. So my x-intercepts are negative 4 and 5. Number 5. 2 numbers that multiply to be negative 80, but when I add them, I get 2. All right, so 80, 1 and 80, 2 and 40, 4 and 20, 5 and 16, 8 and 10. I think that's all. So 2 numbers to multiply to be negative 80, one of those has to be negative. And those 2 numbers are negative 8 and 10. So putting it as factors, x minus 8, x plus 10. And then we set each one equal to 0. Adding 8 to both sides gives me x equals 8. Subtracting 10, x equals negative 10. So my x-intercepts are 8 and negative 10. Last one. What multiplies to be 25 adds to be 10. Maybe you can get this one without writing on the side. 5 and 5. This one is a case where there's the same number. So we have x plus 5, x plus 5. Now there's no need to set both of those equal to 0 because you're going to get the same thing. You're going to get x equals negative 5. Now whenever there's only one number, this is an example where the parabola is actually sitting on the x-axis. It doesn't actually completely cross through. So the only x-intercept is negative 5. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, have a great day.